Okay, yes, I'm Sharon Francis, and I am the business advisor for the Minority Business Assistance Center here in Columbus. Our director is Jesse Mark, and we want to welcome you to our webinar today on uh, understanding and navigating the OhioBuys and state e-procurement process. We are so glad to have with us today Andrew Cochran, who is the state e-procurement director. And he is going to share with us this information. He was with us about a month ago when we had our Small Business Week series with the Chamber of Commerce and SBDC. We served on a panel there, and the information that he was able to provide was very helpful. And we felt that it would be best to have him come back and let him have the entire time to walk us through this process. We have a lot of clients that do have issues with trying to access the contracts that are opportunities that are available on the state's web portal. And so we want to be able to make sure that everybody knows how to access that information so that you can participate. So I am going to turn the mic over to Andrew at this time. And again, thank you for joining us today. We will be monitoring the chat for any questions that you have, and I'm sure that Andrew will be able to respond. Thank you again for joining us, and take it away.
Great. Well, thanks again for having me this morning. We've got a few slides here that we're going to be working through this morning to just kind of educate everyone on how to do business with the state and really kind of specifically focusing in on how to access and get things set up within OhioBuys. I know sometimes state procurement can seem like a little bit of a maze, a lot of things to keep in mind and, a lot of little nuances. And so really the hope here this morning is that we ultimately can kind of give you that roadmap, to really position yourself and your company to be successful, getting set up in OhioBuys. And really what we want to emphasize is the importance of taking the time, doing this now, so that when that solicitation comes along that you think you want to bid on, your account is ready to go and you're not trying to sort of get all of that in order, the day before or the day that the bid is due. So as far as the agenda goes this morning here, we'll touch upon just talking a little bit about how much the state buys and what we purchase, but then really kind of getting into talking about how do you manage your profile, how do you set that up in OhioBuys, how do you look at commodity codes, how do you find opportunities to do business with the state, and then ultimately how do you respond to those opportunities in OhioBuys as well. So really when we get the question about, well, what does the state buy, the short answer is we basically buy anything that you can think of. We buy obviously a great variety of goods and services, everything from IT products and services, vehicles, food, professional services, really, if you name it, we probably buy it in some form or fashion. So really, take that as sort of an invitation to say that no matter what your company might specialize in, chances are there's someone at the state that is looking for goods and services that you provide. We actually purchase over $5 billion a year worth of goods and services that are required by the agencies. And this is really just sort of spend that is under our control as the Department of Administrative Services. So a lot of activity going on, tens of thousands of purchase orders being issued every year. A lot of activity there and really, looking to continuously expand that supplier base and get more suppliers into the system and ultimately participating in that process. Just a little bit of background here before we get into OhioBuys. Do know that by law, state agencies are required to purchase from what we call requisite procurement programs prior to making the purchase from some outside supplier. So our Ohio Penal Industries is within our Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. Basically what they do is that they provide work opportunities for individuals that are within their facilities, teaching them, work skills and things like that so that they can apply those upon their release to get into, maybe a different career. And so that is one example. Our community rehabilitation programs, where we purchase from qualified suppliers that basically employ individuals with some sort of work limiting disability. And then you can see some of the others on there. Some of the other requisite programs are actually different parts of state agencies. So for example, if our Office of Information Technology provides, server space, for example, or hosting services, our agencies are required to check with them first. And if they can fulfill that need, our agencies are required to purchase from them. So just something to be aware of. Really doesn't have any impact on you as a supplier in terms of whether or not to register. But do know that by law, we are required to have our agencies sort of purchasing from each other, when it makes sense to do so. We are also required to purchase off of existing contracts that are established by the Department of Administrative Services. So as part of our function, we do establish statewide contracts, some of which are mandatory use, some are optional. And so do keep that in mind as well, that, it's really a big benefit for suppliers if you can see one of those competitive opportunities out there. If it's being awarded by DAS, that is a way that we kind of sort of make the sourcing decisions on behalf of the state and set up those contracts. So really strongly encourage you to be looking at those opportunities, where you can participate and ultimately, sort of lock in your company's ability to supply state agencies for some of their goods and services needs. The way that we actually go through the contracting process, a couple different ways that we can establish a new contract. It really is sort of boils down to the main method is competitive selection. That is actually a very specifically defined term in the revised code. But basically the way that we establish contracts through competitive selection is we're issuing invitations to bid or requests for proposal. We don't do many reverse auctions, but we do primarily rely upon the bids and the proposals there. The invitation to bid is really going to be, what we are, when we're able to define very clear specs, and we're awarding that ultimately to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. Request for proposal allows us to actually score the responses and award based on best value. What's the most advantageous offer to the state? We do also have some other contracts that we negotiate. You can see those listed here. One thing that I do always like to remind suppliers of is that, if you are aware of state term schedules, if you've ever dealt with those, or perhaps you're listed as a dealer on there, do know that our agencies are required to obtain 3 quotes, not just solicit, but actually obtain 3 quotes prior to making a purchase off of one of those contracts. For that reason, it's really important that if you are listed on a state term schedule as a dealer, really critical that you actually are responding to the agencies as they put those solicitations out there. Not only to help them get the 3 quotes that they need, but also to make sure that we're getting the best price and the best deal for the state. There's some other contracts here. I'm not going to necessarily run through those this morning because I really want to kind of get into the OhioBuys stuff. But wanted to also just kind of provide some context for you before we dive into that. So when we talk about establishing your account, your profile in OhioBuys, what we like to do is usually encourage folks to start. You can either go to our procurement website, going to procure.ohio.gov. And then from there, what you can do is actually click on our Accessing OhioBuys link. It's under, if you go up here to bidders and suppliers, and then actually there will be a section for resources. And I think that's actually on the next slide. Bidders and suppliers, then go to resources. You'll see this red icon here to launch the OhioBuys application. So this is really going to be where you actually are going to start that process of creating your company's account within OhioBuys. here's what that page will look like when you actually land out there. You'll get a screen like this, and then there will be a button for you to actually log in. And then when you get there, this is going to be where we start to ask you about whether or not you have an OHID. An OHID is basically, it's a single sign-on credential that we have at the state of Ohio. It allows you as a supplier to actually access multiple different state of Ohio applications with one set of credentials. So for those of you maybe that are already fully registered suppliers with the state, if you've ever done anything in the supplier portal in terms of managing your accounts payable transactions, receiving payments from the state, things like that potentially, then you may already have an OHID. But if not, then we will be asking you to actually go ahead and create that here. Keep in mind, an OHID is something that is unique to an individual, specifically to an individual email address. So we do ask if your company's got 5 different users, we do ask each of them to set up their own OHID account, which we'll kind of walk through here at a high level with the next couple of slides. If you already have an OHID, you can certainly go ahead and enter your username and your password over here in these gray sections and log in, and that will kind of take you back to OhioBuys as well. If you've not created an OHID though, basically once you create that, what you're going to do is walk through this and enter all of your information. So you're going to put in your email address, you're going to put in all of your necessary information, first name, last name, different things like that. You'll set up password recovery options. We like to rely upon self-service. So we'll ask you to, for security questions that you can answer if you forget something. And then ultimately, once you complete that setup process, it does ask you to acknowledge some terms and conditions, and then you'll be able to, at that point, finish creating your account. Do know that the OHID is actually separate from OhioBuys. And what I mean by that is when we actually are routing you out to OHID, it is a separate part of our agency that actually supports this part of the process and manages these accounts. So you are technically speaking sort of jumping outside of OhioBuys at this point to establish that account. And like I said, really that is ultimately intended to give you one set of user credentials, one password, one username to access multiple applications, not just OhioBuys. All right. Once you've set that profile up, you've established your OHID, you will get an email notification, and you will be ready to go and actually log into OhioBuys. Our website does kind of detail, we've got 2 different processes, basically. One is what we call bidder registration. Bidder registration is basically for those companies that have never done business with the state before. So maybe you're new to doing business with the state, not sure that you fully want to register yet, and kind of give us all of your information in terms of your W-9 and things like that. OhioBuys does allow you to do sort of a light registration in the system where you can provide some high-level information about you and your company, and that will allow you to get into the system and actually bid on solicitations. We also have what we call suppliers. Suppliers are going to be those companies that are fully registered with the state. The best way to kind of think about that is if you have received payment from the state previously, if your company has been paid by the state of Ohio, then chances are you are a supplier. And so that's something else to just kind of keep in mind. Really, regardless of whether you're a bidder or supplier, once you kind of have done the initial setup, then the capabilities within OhioBuys are pretty similar to one another, and that you can come in and actually manage your account. The other thing that I will kind of just point out here is after you've set your OHID up, you still need to have a corresponding account set up in OhioBuys with the same email address. So if I go out to OHID and I register with my email address, if I don't have a corresponding account established in OhioBuys, then OhioBuys is not going to recognize me when I try to log in. And so at that point, that's where the training materials will kind of walk you through the different ways that your account can get set up in OhioBuys. If you have other people from your company already in OhioBuys, then they have the ability to set you up. If you are, maybe you're sort of it's just your business, you're the only person that is there at your company that's going to be getting in here, then you can be working with our help desk team to get your account initialized and set up here in OhioBuys as well. So like I said, a lot of information out on our website that I'll show you the link to here in a moment. I do see a question there in the chat. Oh, never mind. So we'll keep moving then. So once you've logged in to the system, we will move on to talking about commodity codes. Commodity codes, the state of Ohio, we use what's called the UNSPSC codes. That stands for the United Nations Standard Products and Services Codes. That's sort of an international way, sort of an international taxonomy of commodity codes for the different goods and services that are out there to be purchased. This is a website, if you want to kind of visit to learn more about some of the different commodity codes and search for possible codes that are out there, do feel free to do so. This website is actually fairly intuitive. You can go and actually insert a code number or a code name. Maybe maybe you're in the IT space, for example, and you type information technology. You can search by that, or if you happen to have a specific code, you can also look at that. The next slide here will kind of show you, if you search for janitorial is the title, you will see, a set of search results that comes back. And the reason that we are showing you this is that this then can become the commodity codes that you use to register your company under in OhioBuys. The reason, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, in OhioBuys, we use these commodity codes to ultimately not only know what your company offers and provides, but also what we do is we then look at when we're sending a solicitation out, when we're posting a solicitation, we will notify any supplier in that same family of commodity codes about that opportunity. So for example, if you provide janitorial equipment, when an agency creates a solicitation using this commodity code or any of the commodity codes underneath of it, we will basically notify you and say, hey, there's a solicitation out there based on the commodity codes that you've identified. We think it's something you might be interested in, and we'll basically send you the link to where you can go out and find that solicitation, look at some more details, and figure out if it's something that you ultimately want to participate in. All right. So moving on to the next one then, so the next slide there. Once you've logged into OhioBuys, you will see a screen that looks very much like the one here on my screen. Say OhioBuys across the top, and then you'll have some of these different headers. And then over here on the right, you will have basically an icon with your name next to it. And then you'll also have your company's name that you are associated with in OhioBuys. Furthermore, if you are a fully registered supplier already, and you're already done business with the state previously, if you hover over these different rows here, you'll see the different site locations that are associated with your company in OhioBuys. So if you think about this, we've got sort of this head office level, and then any different address locations that you have. So in this particular case, Brown Enterprise Solutions has just one location, and so they can basically toggle between their head office and their supplier location. This is something that's really important to keep in mind as a supplier. Typically, what we want to see happening is agencies, when they are sourcing and contracting with the state, that they're doing business at that head office level. However, when we get to the point of actually cutting purchase orders, that's where we're going to have those agencies logging in at that address location. And the easiest way to identify that is just if this ID number here on the end has a dash on it, that's going to be an address location. And the analogy that I always like to use there is if you think about someone like Sherwin-Williams that maybe has, hundreds of different office locations across the state. We want to make sure that we're sending the PO to the office in Columbus and not the office in Cleveland. And so that's really sort of the driving force behind why we've got that different level of granularity there. But in any event, when you log in, do just kind of take some time, familiarize yourself with that. And then ultimately, we'll talk a little bit more here about managing commodities. Typically, you'll want to do that at the head office level. All right, so once we've got logged in, we've kind of gotten ourselves acclimated to the screen. Then what you can do is you can actually come over here to review your company profile and your information. If you click on this company profile tab, you will be brought to a screen that looks like this. At this point, you'll see a few different tabs of information, and our training materials do walk you through this in a lot more detail. But in the event that you need to manage your contacts, like I was talking about earlier, maybe you've got someone new at your company that's created an OHID, and now they want to get added into OhioBuys. You can add them here. Maybe you had someone leave your company, and this is where you can go in and remove them as a contact as well. For commodity code purposes, you'll go over here to where it says additional information. And then once that comes up, you'll actually be presented with a couple of different fields here. If you want to tell us about the counties that you serve in Ohio, you can do that. You can select all of them. You can select just certain ones. But then you can also come down here and select the commodity codes that your company offers. We do have about 36,000 different commodity codes in here. So do take some time to kind of look through that. Sort of the easiest way to maybe think about this is we do have sort of these what we call 2-digit codes. It's basically, it's just 10 and then 6 zeros, 20 and 6 zeros, so on and so forth. If you want to keep it really high level and just tell us that, you provide live plant and animal material and accessories, and you don't want to necessarily tell us that you have cats or dogs or whatever, you can just kind of pick that very high level commodity code. But to the extent that you want to provide more detailed commodity codes, if you're a certified minority business enterprise, for example, they are typically getting certified at a more detailed level, down to this usually the 6-digit level. And so that is something else to kind of be mindful of. But go on in there, take a look at the commodity codes, and ultimately, fill that out so that we know what commodities your company is supplying, so that we can notify you about the relevant solicitations. When you open that up, if you want to, and I should have showed this on the last slide, you can click See All to kind of bring up the full list of commodity codes. And then there will be a keyword selector there, or a keyword filter that you can use to search for a specific keyword. So for example, if you wanted to put something in here, maybe you wanted to look for something that had the word luggage in it or apparel, you could put that in there, you could search. And then what OhioBuys will do is it will start to boldface the different commodity code categories and allow you to start drilling down into that. If you want to, you can click this plus icon, and that's going to open up what we'll see on the next slide, which is a more detailed listing of the types of commodity codes under this top level. And so if you want to, you could select something like clothing or footwear here. If you wanted to go down further and pick even more detailed commodity codes, you could do that as well. And last but not least, maybe you look in here and you say, yeah, you know what, actually I provide all of these different types of things. You could also just click this little hand icon here, and that would check this code as well as everything else underneath of it. So we've kind of given you the option to pick at a very high level or pick at a very detailed level as you see fit. All right. Not seeing any questions in the chat there so far, so we will keep moving forward here. So now let's talk a little bit about finding opportunities online in OhioBuys. Basically, what you'll see here, hopefully this top part of the screen looks familiar. This is where you would have gone to log in. If you scroll down further on this page, and this is generally what we call the OhioBuys public portal. If you just go out to ohiobuys.ohio.gov, this is where you will land. But you'll see down here on the bottom half of the page that we've got some different buttons pointing to what we call our public solicitations page or our public contracts page. This allows you to actually go out there, and if we click on public solicitations to view what opportunities are currently out there, you will get a page that looks largely like this. This page does have, the screenshot doesn't do a great job of showing it, but the screenshot or the screen here will have some filters across the top that you can use to sort of filter down the search results and look for relevant solicitations that may be of interest to you. So for example, maybe you have the solicitation ID number, you can search by that. Maybe you want to search for anything that has to do with arbitrators. You could use that keyword to search. You could filter by date or by commodity, by type of solicitation. A lot of different tools at your disposal to help kind of identify the solicitations that might be of interest to you to respond to. Once you've found a solicitation that's of interest, then you can go ahead and actually click on the pencil icon to open the details on that particular solicitation. The solicitation details are right here then. Those will actually show you the details of that particular opportunity. So not only the name, but also the summary. This will include, some details on what specifically is the agency looking for. If there's any relevant process notes, maybe they want to include the link to the training materials. Maybe they want to actually provide some details on the basis on which the award will be made. All of that type of information is here. If there were item grids or questions that had already been posed, all of that type of stuff would be listed here for you to review. So now we'll talk a little bit about responding to a solicitation. So once you've found a solicitation, maybe on the public portal that you want to respond to, there is a button here. There is a button up here at the top that will say participate in RFX. And by clicking on that, it will prompt you to actually log into the system. And at that point, you will be able then to go ahead and start the process of responding to the solicitation. I do see a question in the chat there. It says we are providing on-site skilled nursing and physical therapy, speech therapy services. There's no health commodity to request for. Please advise. Yeah, so if you need to, when you go out to the commodity code selector, I'll kind of cycle back to that slide. This is where it takes a little bit of investigative work sometimes. Typically, if you look for something like nursing, I would think that you'll be able to find some sort of a commodity code for that. And the way that these commodity codes are structured is that at the highest level, you'll see 2 digits. So in this case, 53, and then all of these underneath of it are going to still start with the 53. And that's sort of the way that the taxonomy works, and sort of associating these codes with one another, as we go up or down, higher or lower. I would encourage you to go out there and take a look and try some different keywords. Try nursing, try healthcare, try medical, try speech, that kind of thing. And I would be, like I said, we've got about 36,000 commodity codes in the system. If you still can't find what you're looking for, then by all means, please feel free to reach out and submit a help desk ticket. And our team can certainly help you find the right commodity code to list on your profile. All right, I see another question there about, we started recently submitting quick quotes, don't know where to check the status after our submission. So that's a great question. Let's talk through how to respond, and then I can kind of talk through how you can actually review that in just a second here. So when we actually talk about responding to the solicitation, again, keep in mind, we talked about that participate in RFX button. I do apologize again for the technical issues there. All right, so once you've logged into OhioBuys, you do have the ability to, basically what we're going to ask is for you to acknowledge the terms and conditions. If you are bidding on a contract that you're already a party to, then the terms of that contract will apply. If the solicitation has a specific set of T's and C's, then those will be what applies. And if neither is the case, then basically what we're asking is for the supplier to acknowledge the state standard terms and conditions in order for you to proceed with actually responding to a solicitation. So we'll go through and we'll actually respond to, or I'm sorry, acknowledge those T's and C's. And then once you've done that, you'll be able to actually log in, fully view the details of the solicitation. And then if you need to, you can also submit what we call inquiries about the solicitation. So maybe you have questions, maybe something in that solicitation isn't quite clear on what the state is actually seeking. We do give you the ability to actually send a message in, send a question in regarding that solicitation to the person running that, and then they have the ability to respond to that solicitation, or I'm sorry, to that inquiry and post it back out so that all of the different suppliers that might be interested in that can see it and make sure that everyone's clear on what we're seeking. Once you've clarified everything that you need to, you're sure that you understand what the ask is, then you've got the ability to actually go in and respond to the solicitation. Now in the solicitation in OhioBuys, that really will kind of consist of two parts. There's going to be what we call the questionnaires. The questionnaires can kind of run the gamut from anything from, we want you to just basically upload something like a resume or a cover letter, all the way to very detailed questions in terms of, please document your past experience on a project like this. It really just kind of depends on how the agency has set those questions up. So do take some time, review that, and see if there are questions. There will be a questionnaire tab on the solicitation that you can kind of see listed right here, right under the item. But there's also then what we call the item grid, which will be housed if you click on the item icon there. The item grid is going to be what are those specific things that the state is actually asking you to price and to actually bid on as part of the solicitation. You will also have the ability to attach any requested information. So maybe you need to upload a copy of some documentation. That capability exists as well. And then finally, being able to actually submit your proposal. And the training materials that we have out there for suppliers will show you some screenshots of this. I don't think I have any in this deck. But basically, once you've submitted your proposal, it will actually display a message to you in the system that says, the proposal has been successfully submitted. You will get an email notification as well. And then finally, you will also have the ability to log back into OhioBuys and look up your proposal and verify that it is in fact in submitted status. It's been submitted and it's not still sitting there in progress. The last thing just to kind of be aware of is that, just like you may have clarifications for us or inquiries for us about, hey, what does this mean in your solicitation? From time to time, we may also have questions for you about your proposal. So sometimes we may not be clear on what a part of your proposal is actually saying. Perhaps there's something that we need to follow up with you on, get some additional information. And so that is sort of what we call the clarification process in OhioBuys. And really the last piece for you as a supplier to be aware of is, be prepared for those types of questions. The last thing we want to do is have to disqualify a potential supplier because they didn't respond to our clarifications. So do be mindful of that, that, if there's something that we need to follow up with you on, OhioBuys is going to be how we're doing that. And so just be prepared to keep an eye on it and make sure that if we reach out to you, that you're getting a response back to us. Just a couple of notes. One of the things in terms of responding to invitations to bid. And this really applies to all solicitations. Actually, we do have certain types of solicitations where we might be doing an MBE set aside. Those types of scenarios, we do require that you are actually a certified MBE at the time of the bid opening. And basically, when you are going to submit your response, we do make sure that you are a verified MBE before you can actually submit that response. Do also keep in mind that OhioBuys will automatically stop receiving responses once the end date and time is reached. And so if the bid is due at 1 p.m. on Wednesday, as soon as 1 o'clock is hit, the system will automatically close down and quit receiving responses for that solicitation. I know I kind of mentioned this when we got started, but I will reiterate it here. Please take the opportunity, after we talk today, to go out and review the training materials, get your company set up in OhioBuys if you're not already set up. What we unfortunately do happen to see from time to time is that, if a bid is due on Wednesday at 1 o'clock, inevitably we see some suppliers sometimes that will, come into our help desk at 12 or 12:30 and asking for help and trying to get everything set up. And unfortunately, that's just not always possible. So in order to avoid that, we do encourage suppliers to be proactive, go get yourself set up now, give yourself some time, kind of read through all the training materials, so that way, when that solicitation does come along you're interested in, all you have to worry about, all you have to focus on is actually submitting that response and not having to figure out, how do I access the system? We've already talked about the bid opening process, so I won't spend a whole lot of time here. And then, like we've talked about, once the bids are submitted, we will begin the evaluation process. During this time, we do ask suppliers, we do not communicate with them regarding the evaluation of the solicitation. If we have questions for you, we will reach out. So please do not communicate with us unless you're contacted pertaining to that solicitation. And then really, once the award has been made, this will vary by agency. What we kind of encourage agencies, though, is that once they've awarded their contract, we do encourage them to leave the details on that solicitation out there for a period of time, so that people can go out and kind of review from a historical perspective, who bid, what was the prices that they were bidding, who ultimately won. So do know that the public portal can also be used as a resource to not only look at solicitations that are currently open, but also can be used to view what solicitations have previously been awarded, and what were some of the details in terms of who ended up getting that award and what did they bid as well. As far as responding to requests for proposals go, this is going to be, in a lot of ways very similar. When we do request for proposals, we're basically going to be scoring those responses. We're not just looking at cost, for example, but that is really, the main difference, other than obviously the solicitation will be structured a little bit differently as well. You can kind of see the general parts of an RFP that typically comes out, usually sort of a summary, sort of a description of what problem it is that the state might be trying to solve. Those will come with instructions on how to submit the proposal, how to respond to inquiries. We will, define the evaluation criteria, how many points are we awarding to certain parts of your proposal, and then also talking about the award process. I'm not going to go through all of these pieces here, but here's just another slide to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that we're generally looking for as parts of a proposal. Again, the RFP will specify what all needs to be included, so you will not have to guess. But this is usually a good sort of reference point just to kind of understand what are the different things that we're going to be looking for from a supplier when we're doing an RFP. We've already talked about the opening, nothing really different there for RFPs. And then we'll talk a little bit about marketing your business as well. One of the things that the state of Ohio does, our Department of Administrative Services does, is we actually have what we call our cooperative purchasing program. And that allows political subdivisions, local governments from around the state to piggyback and purchase off of our contracts. But we also work with them to be able to use OhioBuys, something that we're continuing to grow out, but basically the ability to use OhioBuys in order to post solicitations as well. There is a link here in the slides, and I'll send these slides over to Sharon here after our conversation this morning. But there is a link here that you'll be able to use to go out and look up cooperative purchasing members within your county as well, in case you want to continue to try to reach out and develop additional lines of business that way. The last couple of slides here, just some other reference information for you. If you want specific points of contact at an agency, we do have a resource, a website out here that you can go to look that information up and retrieve that contact information. And then last but not least, I've talked a lot this morning about submitting a help desk ticket and also some of the different training materials we have available. This slide at the end provides that information. Typically, if you are encountering some sort of an issue, I encourage people to email instead of call if it's at all possible. It just helps us process that ticket a little bit further, more quickly. The other thing that submitting it via email allows us to do is we're not relying upon when you call in, someone's transcribing your message and putting it into our help desk ticketing system. And it is possible that something may get lost in translation. Whereas if you email, you've got the ability to kind of directly communicate to us what the issue is and what you're seeking our help with. There are also a number of training resources, like I mentioned here. So please do go out, take a look at these. And like I said, I will send these slides over to Sharon here as soon as I can, so that you all have access to these training materials and can reference those as you go getting yourself set up in OhioBuys. Here's just kind of a screenshot of our website as well. This is just basically procure.ohio.gov. You can kind of click on the links for the OhioBuys pages. So I do strongly encourage you to go out there. You can learn a little bit more about what we're focusing on, what we're working on, why this is such a big focus for the state. But a lot of great resources out there. So please do take the time to review that as well. And certainly if you have any questions, reach out to us via the help desk. Here's some other additional resources that you might find of interest. So please do feel free to take a look at those as well. Click around, see if those things might be of assistance. And then the last thing that I wanted to kind of call your attention to is that we are doing webinars here on a regular basis for suppliers. We are holding these about once a month. And so you can see our next one is actually for Friday, June 17th. Where we will, again, give another opportunity for you to sit in, actually hear from the OhioBuys training team on how to access the system and then go about responding to solicitations. So this will have a link out to our website where you can go to register for that. Another great opportunity for you to work directly with our team. Here's some of the same information again for a second time, but also maybe get a few more pieces of insight from our trainers that are in the system every day. As well. Let's see. I think other than that, that was everything that I had. I do see one other question there in the chat. And so yes, the slides will be shared here. Like I said, give me a little bit of time to get those over to Sharon, but hopefully by the end of the day, Sharon, I should have those over to you, and then share that with everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. This was a packed with a lot of information, obviously, as to not only registering your business through the portal, but then how to access those contracting opportunities, and then to check what others have already been contracted. I think a lot of times people need to see what bids have been awarded to whom, particularly those that are to minority business enterprises, because many of you, of course, have registered so that you can get access to those opportunities. So it's always good to see who has been successful, what types of contracts have been awarded. So kind of help you to frame your applications or your contracting proposals. So again, thank you, Andrew, for taking time with us today. I did not know that you all are doing these on a monthly basis, so that's good news. We will put that information in our newsletter so that people can have access to those training opportunities ongoing.
Yep.
Okay.
Sharon, I see a couple of questions there just to recap in the chat real quick.
Yeah.
So I did see your question about how do we check our submitted quotes. As I was mentioning, when you actually submit your proposal, there's a couple of different ways. For one thing, it's going to ask you to sort of validate and submit your proposal. Once that's done, you will get a message on screen that basically confirms the proposal has been submitted. But we also do have in some of the training materials that I'll be sending along the links to, we do walk you through step by step how to actually basically return to your homepage in OhioBuys and then search for the solicitations that you've participated in. And by looking at the status of those proposals, you'll be able to tell that proposal has been submitted.
Great.
And then I did see the other question there about after I create an OHID, I need to create a procurement account. Yeah, so the answer there, unfortunately, the answer is that it's going to depend. If you are already registered, if your company is already registered in OhioBuys as a supplier or as a bidder for that matter, really is going to become a question of whether anyone else from your company has already gone and gotten set up as a contact. If that's the case, if you have, a supplier admin already set up in the system, you can work with them and they can actually set you up as a contact in OhioBuys. If you are the first one from your company to get in there, that's where you're going to need to reach out via the help desk to have our team help get that first person in there and set up for you. In either case, yes, you are going to need to create an account in OhioBuys that uses the same email address and basically matches what you use to register with your OHID. It's just, there are a few different ways of getting there depending on how your company is currently set up. So hopefully that helps.
Okay, great. Any other questions before we shut down today? Okay. All right. Well, we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. And again, thank you, Andrew, and everyone that participated today. We do appreciate you. And yes, we do care. Have a great day.